And now, marine weather around Alaska.
It's now time for your marine weather for the state of Alaska. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and here is the outlook coming up for Monday and Tuesday. First, looking at the sea ice edge on this Sunday, November 12th. We have rather extensive ice development along the Arctic coast from the mouth there, the Mackenzie River, all the way to Utqiagvik. But we have also a strong area of low pressure working across eastern Russia, and it is producing very strong winds. We've had winds gust as high as 85 miles an hour from the southeast. So it's an offshore flow there at Cape Lisburne. Winds have gusted up over 60 miles an hour along the Chukchi Sea coastline, Kivalina, and down toward the Bering Strait at Wales. So any new ice, that's going to have a tendency to shift that around, and brisk winds are also going to cause elevated water levels, including the potential for some minor coastal flooding, especially south of the Bering Strait along the west and southern shores here of the Seward Peninsula in through Norton Sound, and then along the outer Yukon Delta as we go through this Sunday night into Monday morning at least. So this frontal system is going to push inland overnight and early on Monday morning, already be located up here through the central interior with a secondary low trying to develop. That'll happen just off the Kenai coast around midday Monday. And along this front, there will be areas of moderate to locally heavy snow as it pushes eastward. Secondary cold front coming in off of Siberia will push out into the Bering and then moderate, with another push of warmer air in the North Pacific heading up toward the Aleutians with the next area of low pressure. So Monday afternoon, we expect an area of low pressure, not all that strong, but situated right along the north central Gulf Coast, and this will enhance snowfall over the Copper River Basin. We expect a burst of snow around in the Anchorage Bowl on Monday morning. A quick 5, 6 to 8 inches of snow with locally higher amounts along the eastern hills. Blizzard warnings for Whittier and for Thompson Pass as this low pressure area continues to work its way east. By the time we get into Tuesday, that low weakens as it moves into the across the northern panhandle, and here comes the next low crossing the western Aleutians up into the lower Bering Sea, and this low will take a track eastward up into the southwest interior by early Thursday morning. So in the meantime, along areas of the inner channels of the panhandle, winds will be north-northwest, 10 to 15 knots, waves 3 feet there. Stevens Passage, 6 feet. Dixon Entrance, 4 feet there in Lynn Canal with southerly winds to 15 knots. A mixed bag of winds here out in the outer coast within 15 nautical miles of shore. North wind south of Sitka, 15 knots, waves 8 to 9 feet. West wind into Sitka at 15 knots, but then more southerly winds expected west of Gustavus on up outside of Yakutat Bay, and increasing to 20 knots from the south there at Cape Suckling with waves of 6 to 8 feet. And on Tuesday, with that low pressure coming in across the northern panhandle, we expect for the inner channels winds to be southwest at 20 knots there, Ketchikan and Metlakatla, with waves of 4 feet. Look for northwest to north winds 15 knots for the inner channels, with waves a few feet there from Stevens Passage up through Lynn Canal. And then as we go along the outer coast, look for west winds of 20 to 25 knots with gusts of 40 knots there south of Sitka and off of Craig, with waves as high as 14, 15 feet. Backside of the low, winds will be out of the north-northwest as 15 to as high as 25 knots west of Gustavus, with waves of 9 to 13 feet. Along the northwestern Gulf, strongest winds are going to be there out of the entrance of Cook Inlet to northeast of Kodiak City, 35 to 40 knot westerly gales with waves 9, 10 feet. Within Prince William Sound, southeast winds to 35 knots. We're going to have this low center just try to take shape in this region Monday early afternoon. Backside of the low, winds turn northwest to westerly, but again with the strongest winds here coming out of the entrance of Cook Inlet. By Tuesday, winds and waves do come down. Look for generally west to northwest winds, upper Cook Inlet and into Prince William Sound at 15 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. As we drive down along the Kenai coast, west winds to 20 knots, and then winds become southwest at 15 to 20 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 4 feet. Across Kodiak Island on Monday, we are going to have winds out of the west at 25 to 30 knots, waves running around 7 feet. 30-knot west-southwest winds, especially here down through Bristol Bay and Cold Bay up to 30 knots with waves of 9 to 11 feet. Winds downwind here in the North Pacific side of the peninsula, out of the west at 20 knots with 4 to 6 foot waves. For Tuesday, winds will be southerly across Kodiak Island at 15 knots with waves of 3 to 4 feet, turning southeasterly, 20 knots or so, but increasing as we get down here toward Cold Bay and False Pass. South to southeast winds increasing to 30 knots as another frontal system will begin to work its way across the peninsula, and associated with that next area of low pressure that'll be out across the lower Bering late Tuesday into Wednesday. Now across the Aleutian chain, winds generally with some sort of southerly component to 20 knots, the eastern and central Aleutians, with waves here 8 to 10 feet on the North Pacific side, right around 8-9 feet on the Bering side. But by the time we get into Tuesday, the next low is going to be approaching and working its way up northeast here of the western Aleutians. So with winds around this system, we're expecting 35 to as high as 45 knot gale force winds across the Aleutian chain, generally out of the southwest, except for shifting to the northwest on the backside of the low. Highest waves will generally be west of Adak, as over 20 feet, 20 to 25 feet. Winds generally within the eastern Aleutians will be running somewhere between 11 and 15 feet, but this will be a rather windy system as it works its way. Then the low continues off toward the east, heading toward the southwest coast, coming on shore around Kuskokwim Bay as we go into the early morning hours of Thursday, late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. Winds on Monday, southwesterly 30 knots into Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, waves 9 to 10 feet. 35 to 40 knot gales from the southwest impacting St. Paul down to St. Matthew to St. Paul. Along the lower Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, south-southwest winds to 35 knots with waves 8 to 9 feet. Winds come down Tuesday. We're expecting along the next front 40 knot northeasterly gales to, there at St. Matthew with 12-foot waves. South to southeast winds 30 knots into Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays. And the winds turn back, the westerly winds there onshore 15 knots there north of Hooper Bay, Imanak, and then on up toward westerly winds 20 knots into Norton Sound with waves 6 feet. For areas of south of the Bering Strait, north of St. Lawrence on Monday, we're anticipating south-southwest winds 30 to 35 knot gales and waves as high as 10 to 16 feet there on the north side of St. Lawrence. Up through the Chukchi Sea, south winds to 30 knots with 9-10 foot waves. South winds continue falling off to about 25 knots. Look for south-southwest winds 25 knots along the Arctic coast with ice in place there east of Utqiagvik. Any open waters could produce waves 4 or 5 feet. And then for Tuesday, we're looking at southwest winds 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast. As we go down along the Chukchi Sea, west to northwest winds around 25 knots, and then winds will turn back toward the northeast to east once you get south of the Bering Strait. On the north side of St. Lawrence, look for 15 knot winds out of the east-northeast with waves of 5 to 9 feet.